Millionaire CEO, was allergic to women for 30 years, until the wrong intern walked into his life. He wasn't touched in 30 years, not a handshake, not a hug, not even by accident. They said it was an allergy, but it was something far worse. And one rainy morning, she walked into the wrong room. No resume, no intentions, no idea who he was. She talked too much, smiled too wide, and made the most dangerous mistake of all. She made him feel. And he never forgave her for that, not until the day she almost walked away, taking his last chance at love with her. The interview that changed everything. Of Manhattan, 11:07 IAP. The rain hadn't let up since dawn, the kind that didn't fall hard, just slow, like the sky was mourning something it couldn't explain. Ava Morgan stood on the sidewalk outside Whitestone Tower, clutching a leather folder that was starting to curl at the edges. Heels were soaked. Her umbrella had inverted 3 times. Her last $8.00 had gone to... She looked up at the sleek skyscraper above her, glass and steel kissing the clouds. Somewhere in that tower was a job, a paycheck, a way to pay for her mother's treatment. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the elevator button, her reflection blinking back in the chrome. She had no idea that 1 floor above the media department, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Quiet, high stakes, and private. And she had no idea she was about to walk into it. Grayson Hail sat in silence. Across from him, 5 women had taken turns trying to impress him, pitched themselves as the right one for the role his grandmother insisted he fill. A girlfriend, a placeholder, someone the press could photograph, someone to give Margaret Hale the illusion of peace before her body gave up the fight. He hated every second of it. "I don't do flowers. I don't like lies," he said calmly, folding his hands. The woman across from him blinked. "Excuse me? You're wearing rose perfume and fake sincerity. Please don't insult me further." She stood quickly, red-faced, and left without another word. The assistant at the door, nervous, glanced at her clipboard. "That was number 5, sir. There's one more." He didn't respond. He just leaned back in his chair and waited, eyes cold as slate. Then the door opened again, and Ava Morgan stumbled inside. Hair damp from the storm, cheeks flushed from running, her voice breathless and unsure. "Hi, I'm Ava Morgan. I'm really sorry I'm late. There was a subway delay and, look, I'm here for the interview with the media team. Position 6. There was a pause, a beat of silence. Grayson's eyes lifted slowly, calculating. She was not number 6 on the list. But she was the first one who wasn't rehearsed, who wasn't made up and curled and hardened by the world of money and motives. She was wide-eyed, real. "You're here for the interview?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, adjusting her soggy folder, still catching her breath. "Yes, for the junior editor position. I know I look like a mess, but one of your conditions?" She blinked. "My conditions?" "Working closely with someone like me. Around the clock." She laughed awkwardly. "I mean, I'd like weekends off, but if I have to work late, Wait, did you say around the clock?" He stood slowly and walked around the table. His presence filled the room without raising his voice. His tailored charcoal gray suit had sharp edges, and his eyes had none. Only silence. 50,000 per month. Immediate start. You'll be by my side, always. If that's a problem, this ends now. Ava blinked. $. She looked around, suddenly aware the office was too big, too polished. The walls had real oil paintings. There was no mention of media here, no resumes. Just him. I think I'm in the wrong room," she said, stepping back. But he didn't blink. "No, Miss Morgan, you're exactly where I need you to be." It happened quickly after that. A contract was drawn. A job she didn't fully understand was offered. And for the first time in her life, Ava didn't run. Because her mother's hospital room smelled like bleach and wilted flowers. Because the woman at the front desk said they needed payment by next Friday. Because sometimes desperation walks into a boardroom and doesn't ask questions. It signs on the dotted line. The elevator ride down was quiet. cold metal walls and the hum of 1,000 decisions she couldn't take back. She stared at the contract in her hands. It was thick, too thick for a simple job. 24 hours a day, she whispered to herself. For what? Behind her, Grayson Hail stood still, his reflection in the steel. No expression, no warmth. She turned to him. Like me. He didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, because you weren't trying to impress me, and because my grandmother has cancer, she wants to see me in love before she dies. I've spent 30 years avoiding contact, Miss Morgan. You're the first person I've let this close, and you didn't even notice. A voice lifted away. She didn't know if she was falling into something or saving herself from drowning. All she knew was this. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her chaos and still said, "You'll do." And for now, that was enough. Chapter 1. The Girl in the Wrong Room. Ava Morgan had never been inside a building so quiet. Not library quiet, not hospital quiet, but the kind of silence money buys. Polished marble floors, thick glass doors, and a receptionist who didn't blink when Ava walked past, dripping from the rain, hugging a damp leather folder to her chest. She scanned the hallway, heart pounding. Media department? Media department. She squinted at the black and gold directory plaque on the wall. 42nd floor. Then why did the woman at the front desk wave her up here? She stepped out of the elevator, her heels echoing on the marble. A door stood slightly ajar at the end of the corridor. Frosted glass, silver handle, no label. But someone was inside. She knocked, then pushed it open, and walked into her first mistake. Grayson Hail didn't look up. He sat at the end of the long obsidian table, backlit by gray clouds beyond a full-wall window. His fingers tapped once against the side of his glass ice water, untouched. The woman who entered was not what he expected. No red lipstick, no designer bag, no perfume that made him nauseous. Just a soaked blouse, trembling fingers, and eyes that hadn't yet learned how to pretend. "Hi," she said, too fast. "I'm Ava Morgan. I think I'm late for the media internship interview, floor 40, unless I mixed up the room?" Still, he said nothing. She took another step in, gesturing apologetically with her folder. "There was a subway delay, and my umbrella broke, and... This is probably not your department, is it?" Now he looked up, and something in him stopped. But she had no idea who he was. No polish, no game, no script. "I've reviewed your file," he said flatly. She blinked. "You did?" "You're candidate number 6. "I am." She frowned. "I thought this was for a junior." "What's your expectation for monthly compensation?" he interrupted. Ava hesitated. "I mean, minimum wage is fine. I'm just hoping for something stable." He stood slowly. 50,000. She laughed. "A year?" "Per month." The breath caught. "Are you serious?" He circled the table, stopping just in front of her. Her eyes met his, gray and guarded, like storm glass before it shatters. "You'd begin immediately," he continued. "You'll be by my side 24 hours a day. There will be rules. Confidentiality is absolute. There is no physical contact without consent, and my grandmother must never know this isn't real." Ava stepped back, her throat dry. "Wait, what is this? I thought this was for..." "This is a personal contract," he said. "You're applying to be my fiancée." The contract was printed within minutes, typed by his silent assistant, signed in ink that looked like it cost more than her rent. Ava held the paper in her hands, reading the words again. Term of agreement, 90 days, extendable. Companion for Mr. Hail, in the presence of Margaret Hail. And in double doors, permanent. $50,000, 0 cent, / month, to live in, maintain appearances, no romantic involvement unless explicitly discussed. She looked up at him. "Yeah." "Bye." He turned away. "My grandmother is dying. She wants to see me in love before she goes. I don't do love. I don't do people." "Then why not just fake it with someone else?" Because every other woman in that waiting room came here to be chosen, he said without flinching. You walked in by mistake, and didn't run. Ava exhaled shakily. Her chest ached, but not from fear. I'm remembering her mother's latest hospital invoice. I'm hearing the nurse's voice say, we'll need the deposit by Friday. From knowing that no one else was going to save them. I don't know who you are, she whispered. You will. Back in the elevator, contract in her shaking hands, Ava stared at the floor indicator lights like they were counting down her life. And she felt the weight of what she'd done. Sold her privacy, her name, maybe even her dignity. She didn't feel brave. She felt like a girl playing dress-up in a stranger's war. But when the elevator doors opened and the air hit her face, cold and uninviting, she walked out, because if she turned back now, she'd break apart. At the end of that day, Grayson Hail sat alone in his penthouse study, turning a silver pen between his fingers. The girl had signed. No questions. No tears. Just a glance back, 1 foot in and 1 foot out of fear before she stepped over the threshold. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt like he'd just handed a grenade to a woman who didn't know the pin was missing. He picked up his phone. Text Grandma Hail. Her name is Ava. She's the one. Chapter 2. 50,000 to pretend. Ava didn't remember leaving the tower. Didn't remember stepping onto the sidewalk or into the cab that someone, maybe his assistant, had called. All she remembered was sitting in the back seat of a black car, the contract in her lap, her fingers digging into the soft leather like it might anchor her to reason. 50,000 a month, she whispered, reading the line again. And all I have to do is lie. The car glided through the city like it belonged to no one. Rain traced its way down the windows, soft and slow, as if the world had decided to cry for her since she hadn't yet figured out how. The elevator to his penthouse required a keycard. The driver didn't speak. The walls were marble, and the silence, again, was heavy. When the doors opened, Ava didn't move. Then Grayson's voice broke through. You signed it. That means you're in. She stepped out cautiously, her flats wet, her courage thinner than the elevator's filtered air. The penthouse looked like a showroom for loneliness. Every surface immaculate, every book aligned, even the fireplace didn't dare flicker too loudly. It was the kind of quiet that didn't soothe, it scolded. You'll live here, he said. Second bedroom, left hallway. Don't touch the piano. Ava turned to him. You have a piano? He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone. You'll need to memorize some details. Grandma will expect dates, memories, reasons why you love me, and she'll know if you're lying. I didn't say I'd lie well, she said. He glanced at her, not smiling. Avad's phone buzzed. It was her mother's nurse. The insurance lapses Monday. We'll need the first payment by Friday or the bed won't hold. $50,000, just to pretend. And her mother needed 10 of it by week's end. Ava pressed her phone to her chest, feeling like her heart might shatter from the weight of silence alone. "Me?" she asked again, quiet. Grayson walked past her toward the window, his silhouette framed by gray clouds and falling light. Because every woman I interviewed wanted something. I don't. He turned. You want to survive. That's different. Dinner that night was silent. Ava sat across from him at the long oak dining table, too formal for anyone but ghosts. Her plate had roasted chicken, garlic spinach, and a square of something beige. She barely touched it. He ate like it was a chore. She finally said, You live here like someone who's afraid to leave fingerprints? Grayson's fork paused. She didn't press. She didn't want to. She wasn't here to fix him. She was here to make enough money to save her mother's life. Later, he handed her a folder with pages she wasn't sure were meant to be read by humans. Memorize it. Birthdays, vacations we took, favorite restaurants, inside jokes. She blinked. You have inside jokes? But Margaret will ask for them. He sat on the edge of the couch, still not touching anything, not even the armrest beside him. Ava noticed he never leaned back, never softened. "Is it really an allergy?" she asked. His eyes didn't meet hers. "It's trauma. They just gave it a name so people would stop asking." She nodded once. "Okay, you're not going to ask more?" "You just said people stopped asking. I figured you liked it that way." At 9:37 p.m., she called the nurse, transferred the first payment. The woman cried on the phone. Ava did not. At 9:52 p.m., Grayson knocked lightly on her door. She opened it, barefoot, holding a mug of peppermint tea she'd found in the empty kitchen. He stood in the hallway, expression unreadable. "Margaret wants to meet you tomorrow." Her heart dropped. "Soon?" "She thinks we've been dating for 6 months." She stared at him. "Then we're already overdue for our first fight." His mouth curved, not into a smile exactly, but something near the shape of one. "Then fight with me," he said. "Tell me I'm impossible, that you hate the way I breathe." "I don't hate the way you breathe," she murmured, surprised. He stepped back. "You might. Give it a week." And he left her standing there in borrowed space, holding a borrowed life, wondering how someone so guarded could look so exhausted by silence. That night, Ava lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the contract on her nightstand like a second pillow. She traced the memory of his voice in her mind. "I don't do people. You weren't trying to impress me. You're exactly where I need you to be." She turned the lamp off, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure if she was faking or just beginning to feel again. Chapter 3. The Rules of Being Close. The estate was exactly what Ava imagined money could build, and absolutely nothing like what love would create. Elegant, yes, impeccable, but cold, like every brick was laid by hands that had never been held. As their car pulled through the wrought iron gates and crunched along the gravel path, she caught a glimpse of the ocean beyond the hedges. It was beautiful, but distant, just like everything else here. "I passed inspection?" Ava asked, adjusting the borrowed navy dress that Grayson's assistant had left in her room. Grayson didn't look at her. "You look appropriate." "No, exactly the word every girl dreams of hearing." "It's not a date, Miss Morgan." She turned to face him in the back seat. "You know you could call me Ava." He finally looked at her. "I could call me Grayson." A beat passed, but neither of them did. Margaret Hail was waiting on the back veranda. Sun hat, silver earrings, and a presence that reminded Ava of her grandmother back home in Pennsylvania, sharp-tongued and heartbreakingly kind. "Hi, dear," she said, arms outstretched as they approached. "So, you're the girl who stole my grandson's heart." Ava smiled as warmly as she could manage. "Still working on it, to be honest." Margaret laughed. "I like her already." Grayson stood behind Ava, hands in his pockets, offering the barest nod of agreement. "Come sit," Margaret urged. "I want to know everything. Your story, your favorite coffee, what kind of pet you'd both adopt if you moved to Vermont." Ava froze. Grayson cut in. "She likes chamomile tea, doesn't drink coffee. Grew up with a golden retriever named Buttons." Ava blinked. "Buttons?" Margaret beamed. "And what about our boy here, Ava? What did you think when you met him?" She glanced at Grayson. He was silent, waiting, daring her to get it wrong. "I thought," she said slowly, "he was someone who wore silence like armor." Margaret looked between them, then smiled, just a little too knowingly. "Then I suppose you must be the first person he's ever let close enough to hear it." After tea, Margaret excused herself to rest. Ava followed Grayson into the garden, where rose bushes grew in perfectly symmetrical lines. No wild blooms, no surprises, just order. "You prepped that whole thing," she said. "Even gave me a fake dog." "I had to make you believable." "You didn't need to lie about Buttons." Grayson stopped at the edge of the garden, arms crossed. "You think honesty would make this less fake?" She stepped closer. "No, but it might make it less lonely." His gaze flicked toward her, guarded. "You asked me about the rules," he said. "There are 3. She waited. "Never touch without asking." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. 2. Never lie to Margaret. "You already did." "I lied for her peace," he said evenly. "You'll see why that matters." She swallowed hard. "And the 3rd? His jaw clenched, as if the rule cost more than the others. "We don't fall in love with me." A gust of wind stirred the petals at their feet. A stepped back, folding her arms to mirror his. "You're very confident that's a risk." "I've seen how this ends," he said, softer now. "For anyone who gets close." She tilted her head. "And how does it end?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Alone." That night, Ava lay in the guest room of the Hail estate, the walls too clean, the sheets too cold. Somewhere across the house, Grayson sat in a leather chair beside his grandmother's bed. Margaret was dozing, and he held a photograph she'd asked to see. Of his parents, long gone, his father's arm around his mother, their wedding day. "We used to look like that," Margaret had said once, before the silence set in. Grayson didn't reply. He didn't tell her the reason he avoided touch wasn't just trauma, it was fear. That everyone he'd ever touched had either left or broken. He didn't tell her that the girl down the hall was the first one to walk into his world without knocking, and the only one who might actually break it open. He just sat there, quiet, as always. Back in her room, Ava opened the contract again, and for the first time, wondered what it would cost if she actually meant the things she was pretending to say. Chapter 4. The Dinner with Grandma. The dining room could have fed 20. Tonight, it served 3. Ava stared down at the charger plate in front of her, gold-rimmed and empty, like a throne awaiting its sacrifice. Candlelight flickered off polished silver and velvet napkins. She had never sat at a table like this in her life. It didn't feel elegant, it felt like walking on glass with bare feet. Grayson sat at the head, Margaret at the opposite end. Ava beside him. Too close. Not close enough. Margaret smiled over her wineglass. "I must say, the 2 of you make quite the pair." Ava managed a quiet, "Thank you," then focused on cutting her salmon with the precision of a surgeon. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since they sat down. Grayson spoke calmly, as if this were routine. "Ava's been a steadying presence, especially with all the company transitions." Ava blinked. "That wasn't part of the script." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "So it's more than just companionship then? You let her into the business?" Grayson sipped his wine. "She sees things others miss." Beat. Margaret turned to Ava. "Like what?" Ava's mouth went dry. But then, something surfaced. An instinct, not a line. "She notices everything," Grayson added, not looking at her now, but something in his voice had shifted. "Even the small things." "I noticed he folds his napkin like it's a report cover," Ava said without thinking. Margaret laughed. Grayson didn't, but his lips tilted, barely. "Tell me," Margaret said, leaning closer. "What was the moment you knew you loved him?" Ava froze. Grayson's hand stiffened around his fork. The room felt like it inhaled. Ava swallowed hard, then looked at the older woman. Her sharp eyes, her fragile hands, the hope barely veiled in her question. "I was crying," Ava said, surprising even herself. "You were?" Margaret leaned in. She said, "In a room full of strangers after a terrible day, and he didn't say a word. He just sat beside me, not touching, not speaking, just staying." Margaret's eyes misted. "You don't let people do that," she said softly. "I know," Ava whispered. And in the silence that followed, Grayson looked at her, not the way a man looks at someone he hired to perform, but like he was trying to remember if that moment had really happened. The thing was, it hadn't. But she meant every word of it. After dinner, Margaret retired early. Her housekeeper wheeled her to the west wing, leaving Ava and Grayson alone in the hallway beneath the soft ticking of an antique clock. They didn't speak at first. Then Grayson broke the silence. "Story," he said. "Where did it come from?" Ava stared at the grandfather clock. "Somewhere I've been." He didn't push. He only said, "You made her happy." Ava turned to him. "What about you?" He looked at her then and said nothing. Later, Ava stepped out onto the back patio. The garden was lit in soft golden pools. The night, humid, quiet, listening. Grayson followed a few minutes after. No jacket now, sleeves rolled. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who'd forgotten how to sleep. "Why did you choose me?" she asked again, not like the first time. This wasn't about the contract now. He stood beside her, looking at the moonlight catching in the ocean spray. "Because you weren't afraid to tell me I was broken." "I never said that." "You didn't have to." A pause. Maybe," he said almost too quietly, "because I wanted to know what it would feel like to be loved by someone who didn't come here for power." Ava looked down at her hands, remembering the contract tucked into her drawer. The one with her signature above the line marked beneficiary of $50,000, 0 cents/month. "I didn't come here for power." And when he looked at her, really looked, she wondered if maybe, for the first time in his life, he believed someone. Chapter 5. Moved in, locked out. The penthouse echoed in Ava's chest like a cathedral, beautiful but meant to be walked through softly. She stood at the door to the guest suite, suitcase in hand, staring at the smooth oak frame like it might snap shut on its own. "You don't have to unpack everything," Grayson said behind her, his voice neutral. "The stay is temporary." Ava turned. "So's every moment, but we still live them." He didn't reply. He never did when her words hit closer than they were supposed to. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, 2 studies, 2 living rooms, but 1 kitchen. That's where their silence first collided. He was already there when she padded in barefoot, wearing the borrowed sweatshirt she kept from college and a pair of socks with tiny storm clouds on them. He wore black, always, no logos, no warmth, just folded sleeves and a silence that didn't ask questions. "I can cook," she said, pouring water into a kettle. "I don't eat late." "I wasn't offering." She paused. "It's for my mom." She pulled out her phone and set it beside the mug. A video chat. Ava Morgan smiled weakly on the other end, her hospital room dim. "I promised I'd still make her tea," Ava explained, "even if she can't drink it." Grayson didn't say anything, but he didn't leave either. That night, Ava found the thermostat set to 64. Freezing. She grabbed a throw blanket from the couch and curled up on the chaise in the windowed hallway. Outside, the city blinked like it was trying to remember what it had forgotten. She didn't sleep, and neither did he. At 3:14 a.m., she heard the soft creak of floorboards, a glass set on the counter. She walked in, silent. Grayson stood shirtless, pouring water from a carafe, his scar just visible beneath his collarbone-thin white party like it had never fully healed. He didn't turn. "Can't sleep?" "No," she said, then added, "You either..." He glanced over his shoulder. "I don't sleep well. Never have." She stepped in carefully. "Do you want to talk about it?" He gave her a look so tired it wasn't cruel anymore, just real. "No." Ava leaned back against the kitchen island. "Okay. Then we'll just not sleep in the same house." A flicker of something passed over his expression. "Where do you go when it gets bad?" she asked quietly. He paused. "Nowhere." "Then that's the problem," she said. "Everyone needs a nowhere." The next morning, Margaret called. Ava watched from the doorway as Grayson's voice softened, just slightly. "Yes, she's here. Yes, she's still smiling. No, I didn't mess it up yet." While Ava watched her gaze mid-sentence, and his lips curved. For half a breath, he looked like a man, not a mask. Later that day, she opened the wrong cabinet. It wasn't locked, but it might as well have been. Inside were photos, stacked neatly like memories boxed and buried. One caught her eye. A boy maybe 8, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and an expression Ava couldn't place. To touch that. His voice stopped her cold. She turned, the photo still in her hand. "Sorry, I didn't mean..." I said, "Don't touch it." And she froze. "Is this your mother?" He stepped forward, not angry, afraid. The cabinet isn't part of the contract. Neither is living like a ghost. The silence. He walked past her, took the photo gently, and closed the cabinet with more sorrow than force. "I wasn't always like this," he said, still not looking at her. "You're..." "Because you didn't burn the pictures." That night, she fell asleep on the couch again, but this time there was a folded blanket waiting on the armrest. Not a word, not a note, just something warm. The next morning, he knocked softly on her bedroom door. "Margaret wants us in the Hamptons this weekend. She's planning a dinner." Yvonne nodded, still brushing her hair. "Okay, what's the dress code?" Paused. Then, "Whatever makes you feel like you belong." She looked at him in the mirror. "I don't think I ever have." His eyes met hers through the reflection. "Maybe that's why I hired you," he said. And for the first time, Ava wondered. If this man wasn't trying to avoid love, maybe he just didn't believe he deserved it. Chapter 6. The Memory in the Closet. The estate in the Hamptons had 2 faces. By day, it wore opulent fountains, arched verandas, sweeping white curtains that billowed like storybook pages. But at night, Ava found its truest expression in the spaces no one visited. That's where the memory lived. And that's where Ava found the door, unlocked, barely noticeable behind a tall potted palm in the upstairs hallway. No plaque, no handle, just a quiet gap in the paneling, as if the house itself wanted to forget it existed. And she pushed. The smell of cedar and dust greeted her. Inside, forgotten things waited in boxes marked hate, and one labeled simply home. She wasn't supposed to be here. She knew that. But something in her chest, a thread pulled too tight, compelled her forward. She crouched beside the first box, opened it, and found the truth. The drawings were simple, pencil on paper, a child's hand, awkward but focused. One page had a single figure tiny seated at the end of a long table. Everyone else was erased, just one boy left behind. Another was darker, a pair of hands drawn over and over, trying to reach something blurred, always just out of frame. Then she found the journal. Not one of Grayson's, but a woman's. Her name was written on the inside cover, Elise Margaret Hail. The entries were sparse, as if time had to be stolen for every sentence. Grayson didn't speak again today, not even to the dog. He just stared at the window. Margaret wants to send him away to that place in Vermont, but he's not broken, just quiet. We still draw, always alone. I think that's how he talks to himself. Ava's eyes burned. She blinked hard, but the next page was blank, and the next. The last thing written was a single line, written in a trembling hand. "I hope one day someone sees him." Behind her, the door creaked. She turned slowly. And there he was. Grayson didn't look angry. He looked like a man standing in the middle of an old wound. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said. "I didn't come here to break rules," Ava replied, holding out the journal. "But I also didn't come to play pretend anymore." He didn't take the book. "I was 8 when she died," he said instead. "My father didn't show up to the funeral. Margaret raised me after that." "I'm sorry," Ava whispered. "No," he said. "Don't be. She did her best. But something in me stopped growing back then. People saw the CEO. They didn't want the boy." He finally stepped closer, taking the journal from her hands. gently, with reverence. "Sometimes I wonder," he said, "if I kept building companies just to avoid building a life." "You built this," Ava said softly, gesturing to the room. "No. This was built for grief. It's a shrine I never meant to keep." A silence settled. "Them?" she asked. "What happened to the dog?" A flicker of something passed across his face. Surprise. "We ran away. I never blamed him." I stepped forward, slow. Maybe he didn't run. Maybe he just didn't know how to stay. Their eyes met. And for the first time, he didn't flinch. Later, they sat on the porch swing in the back garden, facing the sea. The air smelled like hydrangeas and salt. He turned to her. "That story you told Margaret, the one where I sat beside you and didn't speak, was it real?" "9, she admitted. "But I wish it had been." He nodded. And then softly, "I think it was, just not yet." Inside the house, the wind stirred the edges of Elise Hale's journal. It closed gently, as if the story had been heard. Chapter 7. Almost Kissed. The city was quieter from the roof. It still pulsed, still breathed, but the noise softened, as if even Manhattan knew better than to intrude tonight. Yvonne stood by the ivy-covered edge, the soft hum of rooftop lights painting her in gold. Her shoes were off, her hair was pulled loose, and her arms were wrapped around herself. Not from cold, but to hold in what she couldn't yet say. Behind her, Grayson approached with 2 mugs of tea. "I don't usually come up here," he said, handing her one. "I figured," she replied, accepting it carefully. "The garden looks like it's forgotten how to be seen." "So?" he said quietly. She glanced at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the skyline like it had something to teach him. Minutes passed. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The kind of silence they shared now wasn't emptiness. It was recognition. Then he said, "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Signing the contract." Ava let out a slow breath. "I regret why I had to." Grayson nodded, his hand tightening around the mug. "Why not what came after?" she added. He looked at her now. Really looked. And whatever wall he'd built with steel and solitude, it trembled. "You said something once," he murmured, "that I wore silence like armor." "I did." "I think," he said, voice low, "you were wrong." Yvonne's brow furrowed. "You don't?" He shook his head. "I don't wear silence to protect myself. I wear it because I don't believe I deserve the noise of someone staying." She set her mug down, took a single step closer. "I'm still here." He said nothing. So she said it again, firmer this time. "I'm still here, Grayson." He blinked. Like hearing his name said that way made something inside him shift. She reached up slowly and brushed a stray lash from his cheek. He didn't flinch, didn't move. The space between them folded like breath. And when he leaned in, it was careful, like he was afraid to break her, or be broken by her. Her lips parted. His fingers brushed her wrist. And he stopped. And so close. Too close. Not close enough. "I can't," he whispered, pulling away like the air had turned sharp. Yvonne swallowed, her voice barely audible. "Why?" "Because if I kiss you," he said, "I won't be pretending anymore." She stared at him, heart roaring in her chest. And he turned, walked away. Left her standing in the garden, barefoot on the stone path, still tasting the kiss that never came. He shouldn't sleep that night. It's neither did he. Such in different rooms with different reasons. Because some hearts don't shatter from silence. They shatter from the sound of almost. Chapter 8. The Lie That Saved Him. Margaret collapsed during brunch. One moment she was asking Ava if she liked heirloom tomatoes, the next she was clutching the linen tablecloth, her teacup crashing to the floor. Everything after that blurred: sirens, white coats, elevators that moved too slow. Ava didn't let go of Grayson's hand once. He didn't pull away. He didn't speak, just kept walking, like silence might hold him upright. The hospital was cold, too white, too loud with its machines and not loud enough with answers. They sat in a private waiting suite. Ava rubbed her arms. Grayson sat like stone. Finally, a doctor entered. "She's stable," he said. "A minor cardiac episode, but she'll need observation." Grayson stood. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "Yes, but she thinks, well, she believes you're engaged. She kept asking for your fiancé." Grayson blinked. "And?" "She calmed down when we said she was already here." The doctor turned to Ava. Ava's breath caught. "I didn't say anything," she whispered to Grayson. He didn't look at her. "But you didn't correct them." She shook her head. "I couldn't." She looked at me like I was hope. His voice was quiet. "You're not a liar, Ava." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "But I'd rather lie than watch her die afraid." He looked at her for a long time, then walked away. And Ava sat down, hands trembling, knowing this was the lie that would cost her the truth. In Margaret's room, it was quiet again. She lay pale but alert, her eyes soft as she looked between them. "My two favorites," she whispered. "You look so tired." Grayson kissed her forehead. "I am," he said gently. And Margaret smiled. "You don't have to be, darling. Not anymore. She's here now." I sat beside her and took her hand. It was warm, surprisingly strong. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Margaret nodded, closing her eyes. "I knew it, from the moment I saw you." She drifted to sleep moments later. Ava let go slowly. And when she turned, Grayson was watching her. Not angry. Not grateful. Just watching. They didn't speak on the ride home. They didn't touch. They sat side by side in the back of the car, but they could have been on opposite sides of the world. When they entered the penthouse, Ava stopped in the foyer. He kept walking. She didn't. "I didn't mean to lie," she finally said. "Not to her, not to you." Grayson turned. "You didn't lie, Ava." A pause. He stepped closer. One beat, then another. "You did what I couldn't." And her throat tightened. "Which part?" "You loved her?" Her voice cracked. "So did you." He shook his head. "No, you don't understand. I built a world where no one could reach me. I designed silence like a fortress. But you walked in and..." She looked up at him. Stepped closer still. "I'm not scared of love," he whispered. "I'm scared of what it might mean if someone finally stayed. I'm scared of what it means if someone finally leaves." They were close again. Not quite touching. Was. Always almost. Then he reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm, shaking, and didn't let go. That night, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. But they didn't cross the line either. She lay curled on one side of the bed, he on the other. No promises. No touches. Just a shared silence that felt earned. And in the dark, he said her name once. Soft, like a prayer. "Allow," and replied. And she just turned toward him. And for the first time, sleep found them both. Chapter 9. Truth and Reversal. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Would Stone CEOs enjoy control of their company's businesses? Who is a Morgan, really? Photos. Headlines. A leaked copy of their contract. And a single damning phrase. $50,000, 0 cents a month to fake a relationship. Ava stood in the center of Grayson's boardroom, numb as a wall of screens flashed article after article. The executives sat stiff, their silence laced with judgment. She felt like a woman on trial. Grayson hadn't looked at her since they entered. The last thing he'd said was, "Don't speak. I'll handle this." But no one could handle this. Especially not him. After the meeting, he closed the door behind them. The room fell silent again. She finally spoke. "It wasn't me. I didn't leak it." He nodded once. "I know." But his voice was hollow. "What happens now?" she asked. He walked past her to the windows, stared out at the city. "The board wants damage control. Margaret hasn't called. That's not like her." Ava stepped closer. "Then let me fix this. Let me talk to..." His voice was sharp now. Too sharp. She froze. "I'll deal with it," he said. "You've done enough." Her heart cracked. "Excuse me?" "This isn't about guilt, Ava. It's about consequences. I warned you from the beginning. This would break if it became real." Her breath caught. It was real. He turned to face her. "Then that's the mistake." She laughed before she could cry. Because she didn't want him to see. But because she didn't want to see if he'd let her. Margaret's penthouse was quiet when Ava arrived. She'd called ahead. No one answered, but she came anyway. The housekeeper let her in. "She's on the balcony," she whispered. "She saw the news." I stepped outside. Margaret sat in a robe, her tea untouched, a thin blanket over her knees. "I'm sorry," Ava said before anything else. Margaret didn't look at her. "It wasn't the lie that hurt me. It was that you let him believe he didn't deserve more." I swallowed. "He doesn't believe in more. Not for himself." Margaret finally turned. Her eyes were tired but clear. "Then why did you leave?" Ava's voice broke. "Because he told me it was a mistake." Margaret looked at her for a long time, then said, "Then go, prove him wrong." That night, Ava returned to the penthouse. She didn't knock. She walked straight into the living room where he stood, sleeves rolled up, tie undone, like he'd been unraveling himself since the moment she left. "I don't want your apology," she said. He turned. "I want you to stop punishing yourself." Grayson stared at her. "I signed the contract," she said. "I lied to your grandmother. I played a part. But this, whatever it was becoming, it was never pretend." His voice came quiet. "Then why does it hurt like it was?" She stepped closer. "Because we fell in love while pretending not to. That doesn't make it fake. That makes it real in the hardest way." "He didn't speak?" Alden asked. And so she whispered, "Say something." And his reply was soft, shattered. "I don't know how to keep you." She placed her hand on his chest. "You don't keep love, Grayson. You choose it." Chapter 10. The Man Who Could Finally Touch. The ballroom shimmered. Hundreds of guests, chandelier light on crystal glass, jazz spilling like water over satin gowns and champagne flutes. I stood near the balcony doors, her hair swept up, dress navy and simple, elegant in the way truth always was. Everyone whispered when they saw her. The fiancée, the liar, the girl who fooled the billionaire. But she didn't flinch. She scanned the crowd for him. Grayson hadn't arrived. Yet. Margaret found her first. She took Ava's hand with surprising strength. "Come," she whispered. "He always shows up when it's already almost too late." Then the room shifted. He walked in like a shadow cutting through silk, no tuxedo jacket, tie loosened, eyes searching, until he found her. Every step toward her felt like a vow. But he didn't speak first. She did. "Everyone's watching." "I know," he said. "I think I tricked you." "You didn't?" "I think I lied." "I did." He stepped closer. "I'd do it again," he said, "if it meant seeing you walk through my door even one more time." The room fell still. He looked around at them, The crowd, the whispers, the flashing cameras. Then he took her hand, gently, like she was the only person who could teach him how to hold anything without breaking it. "My name is Grayson Hail," he said aloud to the crowd, "and I am not a man who loves easily, or openly, or often. But I love her." The silence deepened. "I loved her when I thought it was pretend. I loved her when I was terrified of being touched. I love her now, knowing she could walk away." He turned to Ava. "Well, if you still believe any part of this was real, please don't walk away." Her breath caught. "You once said you couldn't kiss me," she whispered, "because it would mean it wasn't pretend anymore." He smiled, finally softly. "Nothing about this has been pretend for a long time." And then he kissed her. So full, fine, in front of everyone. And the crowd didn't matter, because the room vanished. And the man who had once been allergic to love, to contact, to connection, now stood holding the woman who had undone him completely. Later, just before dawn, they stood on the rooftop. The city yawned below them. "I don't want a contract anymore," he said quietly. "Then what do you want?" He looked at her, took her hand again, and pressed her palm against his chest. She felt his heartbeat beneath her fingers. Instead, unafraid. "I used to think I was unlovable," he said, "but I think maybe I just hadn't met someone who saw past the silence." She leaned in, rested her head against him. "You don't have to be loud to be worth hearing." The interview that changed everything. They didn't move back into the penthouse. Instead, they found a small house on the edge of Central Park, brick-walled, uneven floors, a kitchen window that faced the sunrise. Grayson learned to share space. Ava learned she didn't have to be afraid of being loved. And both of them learned how to be quiet, together, without needing silence as a shield. Margaret recovered. Not entirely, but enough to sit in their backyard garden and scold Grayson when he forgot to bring her tea with honey instead of sugar. She lived long enough to see them plant their first tree. A cherry blossom. For spring. For soft things. For beginnings. One night, months later, Ava found an envelope tucked into her favorite book. It was the original contract. Grayson had rewritten one line. "The woman who reminded me I am still human." He never mentioned it, and she never returned the paper. Some promises don't need to be spoken. They just need to be kept. They were never perfect. He still froze sometimes when life got too loud. She still worried she'd disappear if she wasn't needed. But they held on, day by day, word by word, touch by touch. Because love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a choice. And they made it over and over, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. In a world full of noise, love is often quiet. It slips in through the cracks, asks for nothing, and offers everything. Sometimes it begins with a contract. Sometimes with a lie. But the real ones? They're the ones that stay long after the paperwork ends. If this story touched something in you, tell me. Have you ever loved someone who didn't know how to be held? Or were you the one afraid to reach? Share what this story stirred in your heart, not for me, but for you. Because sometimes, in telling the truth, we find the ending we've always needed. Until next story. From someone who still believes in love that rewrites the rules.